happy and privileged to be here for IAW. It's a great week, and we're happy to be here, and we appreciate you all coming out despite the terrible cold. I probably wouldn't leave my house tonight, so thank you. So we're going to each speak for about half an hour, tell you a little bit about our personal political journey, and then the activism that we're engaged in on the ground in Israel Palestine, and then we're going to turn it back to you all, and we're going to have some sort of discussion. So please stick around for that if you're interested. And I want you to take it from there. Thank you for coming.
Hi. Good evening. How are you doing?
Wonderful.
Happy Apartheid Week, everybody. Start, right? This is the first event? This is it. It's happening right now. Okay. Hi, my name is Wind and Eran Efrati. I'm 28 years old. I'm from Jerusalem. I'm born and raised in Jerusalem. I'm actually 7th generation in Jerusalem. My grandpa was a 5th generation in Jerusalem. He was born in the old city of Jerusalem. He was a Palestinian Jew. He was born in Jerusalem as a Jewish man, under Palestinian neighbors, people around him. He lived a life with those people before the State of Israel was established. He knew Arabic before he knew Hebrew. His friends, his teachers, his muhtar in his neighborhood. He was a Palestinian. And my grandpa passed away 2 weeks ago. So for me, it's a very sensitive time to say that today when I'm going around in this country and hearing people that tell me that Jewish people and Palestinian people could not live together, I always think about, about my grandpa living that life before the Zionist movement came into town and ruined it. It already happened in the past. So all we want is to continue the circle. I grew up in Jerusalem in a very Zionist, militaristic family, like most of the families in Jerusalem or in Israel at all. Zionist and militaristic. There is no really non-Zionist or anti-Zionist in Israel except for maybe the ultra-Orthodox Jews. Everybody is Zionist. I grew up knowing that if you're non-Zionist or anti-Zionist, you're actually an anti-Semitic. Zionist means Jew. And if you're anti-Zionist, you're hating all the Jews. You want all the Jews to die. I grew up, of course, Zionist, very enthusiastic one. I grew up militaristic. My only brother, my older brother, was an officer in a special unit of the paratroopers in the Israeli army. My mother was an officer in the army. My father was a very high officer in the Israeli army. Until today, is the head of investigation of the Jerusalem police. So I'm coming from a good background. And I was supposed to be next in line as the officer goes. So for my father's side, I grew up with a family that came originally 7th generation back from Iraq. From my mother's side, my family came from Hungary, meaning only my grandma and grandpa came from Hungary. They were the only survivor of the Holocaust. And my grandma was an Auschwitz survivor. And I grew up with her at the same house. And I remember, guys, can we like come, sit or something? I'm crying here about my grandma. There's no respect, anti-Semitism.
It was the tea, sorry.
I'm kidding. Anyway, I grew up with my grandma at the same house. My grandma and grandfather was a Holocaust survivor, and I remember my grandma's stories about Auschwitz. I remember my grandma's stories about the Holocaust. I think what got me the most before all the horrors of the Holocaust was her first story that I ever heard. I was around the age of 13, and the story was an 11 years old girl in Hungary, in Budapest, in a ghetto in Budapest. And our first memory from the Holocaust is the first time she saw Nazi soldiers going in to the camp, to the ghetto in Budapest. So Nazi soldiers went in and just select a few men, arbitrary, just from the crowd. One of those men was my grandma's father. And she remembered how he was taken away and she couldn't say goodbye. And that was the last time she saw her father. And I don't know why that story stuck with me more than any other story. But I guess something in the arbitrary of the situation, the fact that my grandma didn't, had it clear what's going on or why they were taking our father away, and how she's still shaking until today when she's almost 90 when she's telling this story. That really got to me. And I grew up wanting to know whatever I can about the Holocaust. I studied from every different angle. In the Israeli education department, you study it every year anyway, but I want to know more. I didn't care only about the Jewish side. I want to know what was going on in the Nazi side. Meaning how Nazi soldiers can go out and do what they did and then come back home to their family. I almost became obsessed. I read Mein Kampf when I was 15 years old. And I grew up, and like most of my friends and the people in Israel, most of the kids in Israel in the 11th grade, I was off to a delegation to Poland 2 weeks delegation visiting all the camps, something that most of the Israelis kids are doing in the 11th grade. And in the last of these 2 weeks, the last day was Auschwitz. And I find myself going into Auschwitz, the camp that my grandma used to be in and survive. And in some point I find myself in the same hut that my grandma used to sleep in. And then, when I was in a very sensitive, emotional moment, I got a letter that my grandma wrote to me, and that my mother sneaked into the delegation through my guides. And the letter was basically, Irani, you're such a sweet boy, and you got such a big heart, and you're so nice, but I'm afraid that you're taking the Holocaust narrative or story upon yourself too much. It's not your fault that the Holocaust has happened. You have to learn that, you have to study about it. Everybody needs to study about it, but it's not your fault, and I'm afraid that you're too sensitive to it. So please, you can relax a little bit. And maybe it sounds weird now, but for me it was exactly what I needed to hear. It was so sensitive and it was so precise. And I'm finishing my letter, and I decide to read the letter to the rest of the delegation. And I'm reading them the letter, and I'm crying. And I finish the letter, and one of my guides come up to me and says, "Well, Eran, you know what your grandma really wanted to tell you, right?" Yeah, sure, that I'm a very sweet boy and I got a very big heart. I said, "No, what your grandma really wanted to tell you is that a second Holocaust will happen. And it will happen sooner than you think. And if you don't want to take it upon yourself that a second Holocaust will happen, you need to go back home, finish your school, and join the best unit you can in the military as a combat soldier. To her sake, to your sake, to your kids' sakes." And I said, "Okay, if this is what my grandma wants, this is what I will do." And I came back home, I finished my school, and I'm joining the IDF as a combat soldier. This is me, a young, handsome soldier in the IDF. In the beginning of the IDF, I was supposed to be the next officer of my family, and immediately I'm being sent to boot camp. 7 months of boot camp. And in boot camp, all we did was getting ready for a war. For 7 months, every day, we were getting ready for a war with Syria, with Egypt, with Lebanon, with Iran, with any country that you can think about in the Middle East. But in these 7 months, we didn't talk once about Palestinians. And I guess it's kind of weird today to talk about it like this, because Israel was not really in a war in the last 40 years. Since 1973, Israel did not perform in a war with another army, with another, country, with tanks, with airplanes. We did what we called operation with terror groups, like in Lebanon with Hezbollah or in Gaza with Hamas, but we were not performing in a war. But nonetheless, all we did was trade for a war, and we didn't talk about Palestinians once. And in the end of these 7 months, I'm finding myself in a very different kind of war. I find myself in the middle of Hebron, Al-Halil, the biggest Palestinian city in the south of Palestine, counting 180,000 Palestinians. In the heart of the city, there's a Jewish settlement of 800 settlers. Around these 800 settlers, there's something like 500 soldiers, like me. And around us, there's something like 300 policemen, like my dad at the time. So why do we need police and army at the same place? Well, basically because we have two different kind of human beings in the same place. We got Jewish settlers that are, although they're outside of the official borders of Israel, they are citizens of the state of Israel, and getting all the protection as citizens of the state of Israel. And one of the perks is being handled by the police, like all of you will in your town. Just next to them, a house over, a door over, a street over, there's Palestinians. And the Palestinians are, of course, not citizens of any states, and they're under our rule, the military rule, of 18, 19, 20 years old rule. And very fast into my time in Hebron, I will understand that I don't really understand what I'm supposed to do here. I don't really understand what my job, but very fast it will come to me that my main job, most of the time, will be to make sure that those Palestinians understand that there's someone in charge. Us, the army, but also the Jewish settlers in the neighborhoods. And this is how we would make sure that people would understand we're in charge. We will go into houses, we will stand on the roofs, we will take posts from their living room. Our guards, our post will be in the middle of their bedroom at 4 a.m. One of the posts was outside an elementary school in the middle of Hebron. And I would spend there many hours of my day just standing there and thinking. And I would see all the kids coming out and in from school, and I love kids. I always love kids. I worked in education back home in Jerusalem, and I was always trying to smile or something, and the kids were running away to the other side of the street. The kids were terrified. I couldn't handle that. I couldn't understand why a kid will be afraid of me. I was still the same handsome soldier, inside this uniform, and I couldn't get it. And I know today got something to do with the fact that, I had my boots on, I had collars on my face, my helmet, my uniform, my vest, my 2 hand grenades, my 6 packs of ammunition, my M16 in my hand. I understand it now, but I couldn't get it. Why would kids be afraid of me? That was all a costume. So the first weekend I had, I went back home and I talked with my mom. I told her, Mom, there's kids out there in Hebron who doesn't like me. And my mom said, no, Ronnie, everybody likes you. I said, no, seriously, Mom, there's kids who are afraid of me. And my mom said, well, let's think, what do kids like? Kids like TV? Kids like soccer? Kids like candy? I said, yeah, Mom, that's a great idea. I'm going to bring candies in the middle of... So I did. I brought candies in the middle of Hebron. And it actually kind of worked. I went back home. I went back to the base, I'm sorry. It was a second home for me, with my vest and my M16 and my ammunition. But between the ammunition and my tear gas canister, I will have gummy bears, a lot of gummy bears. And between those, I will have the Israeli national snack. What is the Israeli national snack? Nobody know what the Israeli national snack is? Seriously? No? Bamba, guys, bamba.
Bamba. How do you say bamba?
Bamba. Bamba is the Israeli national snack. It's so good. You never tried, nobody here ever tried bamba? You tried it. You know how good it is. Guys, this is Israel's best export, like after weapons, I would say. So it's really good. It's a peanut butter snack. It's crunchy. It's amazing.
They
right?
sell it here too.
They're saying it here. Guys, don't miss it out. I'm very proud of bamba, personally. So seriously, boycott, no boycott. Try the bamba in some way. I'm serious. So I would bring bags of bamba on my vest to Hebron, and I would stand outside the elementary school. I will wait to kids to come out of school, and I will offer them the bamba. And they will run away to the other side of the street because I'm this crazy soldier that trying to give them bags. And after a few days, the first brave guy came up to me, grabbed the bag of bamba, and just ran away. And that will happen like the next day and the next day and the next day. And after like 3 or 4 days, I was standing there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon outside the elementary school, and there's a cute little chubby 8-year-old Palestinian kid come out from the school, and he's looking at me and he's walking slowly to me, and he's saying, candy soldier? And I said, yeah, I guess. And I will take out the bamba and he will grab it, but instead of running away, he will open the bag and offer it back to me. And for me, it was this unbelievable moment. Like, we just had this something between us. We tried to talk. He didn't really know Hebrew, like a little bit, and the only words I knew in Arabic was like, strip down and give me your ID, so it's not gonna work. But we kind of gibberish it out, and we ate bamba for like 5 minutes. And for 5 minutes, I fulfilled my destiny. I protected my country from a second Holocaust, but at the same time, I did this like occupation thing really nicely. And the kid loves me. We had like a real connection. And after 5 minutes, he left. And I would still be there for the next like 8 hours. But after 8 hours, I will get down off my shift, go back to the base, and I will be so happy. I felt like I really fulfilled my destination. And all I want to do is go back home and call my mom and tell her we did it. And I'm getting into the base, and a few guys come up to me and says, yo, Efrati, because this is how we talk in the army, and my last name is Efrati, so they will say, yo, Efrati, man, we're sorry, but we know we just came down of a shift, but we have another mission coming out tonight, and we don't have enough manpower, so you have to come with us to another shift, and only then you can go to sleep. And I'm saying, whoa, wait, but you know what? I don't care this time. I'm so psyched. Yeah, I will do whatever you want. And this is how we left that night to do mappings in Hebron. Mappings is something that happened every night in Palestine, in every city, village, neighborhood in Palestine. Mapping basically saying that a group of soldiers, a unit of soldiers, is going out around 4 a.m. and going into a Palestinian house and doing mapping of the house. Now the ideas are very simple. It's a very simple military basics idea. The first thing is that you have to go at 4 a.m. It's not because we're mean or anything. We just wanted people to be home, and 4 a.m. is kind of a sure bet that people will be home. And the next thing is that you're going into the house, you're basically like, army, Jish, come out! All the family is coming out of the house, standing outside at 4 a.m. The soldiers are guarding the family. The officer is going on with the father of the family into the house. He's starting to tour the house. And there's another soldiers that doing drawings, doing mappings of the house. And the idea is very basic. The idea is that if ever a terror attack will go out from that house, we will be ready. We will know there's 2 back doors and there's 2 windows there, and we will get it. And that's it. And it happens every night, a few times a night, in everywhere in Palestine. And that night, like all the rest of the nights, we find ourselves going out at 4 in the morning to the Abu Snana neighborhood in Hebron, going up the neighborhood, and we need to do 2 houses that night. We're going to the first house. Army, it's January of 2007. All the family is coming out to the snow in Hebron. The officer is going with the father of the family, is starting basically to tear down the house from inside, looking for like weapons or stuff like that. And I was chosen to be the one who's doing the drawings. And I'm drawing the house, the kitchen, the living room, and this is how we're going at it, the first house and the second house. And we're supposed to go back to the base. It's around 5 in the morning, and my officer is telling us, well guys, you know what? You know, the sun didn't came up yet. And if you want, we can do 1 more house, you know? And if we'll do it, maybe we can save one for tomorrow. What do you say? And everybody starts arguing, no, let's go to sleep. And I'm saying, you know what? Forget about it. More time to be outside the elementary school tomorrow. I'm down. I'm there. Let's do another house. And this is how my officer is just choosing, completely arbitrary, the next house over in Abu Snana neighborhood. And we're just walking into it. Jewish army, everybody out. The family is coming out to the snow. The officer and another soldier is going on with the father of the family. They're starting tearing the house down. And I'm drawing the house. And I'm drawing the kitchen. And I'm drawing the windows. And then I noticed a puppet of Winnie the Pooh. You know Winnie the Pooh? Yeah, I love Winnie the Pooh. And I'm starting drawing. I noticed that I'm drawing Winnie the Pooh instead of the house. And I'm going to what it seems to be like a children's room. And then I see the kid from that afternoon standing in front of his bed, naked, and he's shaking. And I started shaking too, and my instinct, like the things I was taught to do, was just to raise my gun into his head. And the kid started peeing his leg. We just stood there shaking in front of one another, and it took like 20 seconds, maybe more, I have no idea. But after something like 20 minutes, the father of the kid saw what's going on inside the house, is running into the room, but instead of pushing me back with his weapon, he's grabbing his kid in his hand, just starts slapping the kid in front of me, slapping the kid, he's looking at me and saying, don't take the child, don't take the boy, don't take the child, I promise I will take care of him, we will punish him back home, don't take him, don't arrest the child, we will punish him, we will punish him. And I didn't really understand what's going on, so I just moved my gun from the father to the child, from the father to the child, and my officer that heard the screaming was running into the room, and I guess he thought that the father was acting kind of suspicious. I was thinking he's acting kind of suspicious too, so we did what we do with everyone that act kind of suspicious in Palestine. We arrest him. And it's always the same way. We have a piece of plastic in our weapon, and we're taking it and we're handcuff them behind their back very tightly, and we cut a piece of fabric in our weapon and we blindfold them. And we're just taking the father, we're leaving the house, and we're throwing the father into the military jeep, and we're just driving away. We're getting into the base, and we're tying the father to the entrance of the base, and I'm just going to sleep. And I'm waking up, and the father is still there. And I'm going back to my shift, praying that I will not see this kid anymore. And I don't, and I'm coming back and I'm eating something, and I'm going to another shift, and I'm coming back and I'm going to sleep, and I wake up, and I'm going to another shift, and I'm coming back and I'm going to sleep, and I wake up, and for 3 days the father is tied to the entrance of the base. And after 3 days, I'm getting a phone call from my dad, who was the head of investigation of the Kiryat Arba, the settlement outside of Hebron at the time. And my dad is calling me and saying, congratulations, son. Me and mom heard the IDF spokesman announcement this weekend from Hebron. They told us that you guys arrested a terrorist in Hebron. And I was really ashamed, I guess, that the only thing I could think about saying to them was, yeah, thank you. It was very scary. And I'm hanging up the phone, but I'm going into my officer's room and I'm telling him, man, what are we going to do with the father in the entrance of the base? And my officer is looking at me and saying, which father? I'm saying the father in the entrance of the base. Saying, what, the guy? Yeah, the guy in the entrance of the base. Oh, the guy from the mapping. Yeah, release him. That's fine. I'm saying, what? And he's saying, that's fine, you can release him. What do you mean? We need to transfer him to investigations, right? We need to transfer him to the police or to another army unit or to something. And my officer is looking at me and saying, no, that's okay, I think he learned his lesson. You can release him. And I'm going out and I'm opening his hands and his eyes and just running outside of the base. But then I remember I didn't fulfill my mission. I didn't came back to the base with all the mappings that I did. So I'm running into the room and I'm getting all the papers that I draw in my vest from the same day, and I'm running into my officer's room and I'm saying, oh my God, man, I'm so sorry, I screwed up. But here it is. Here's all the drawings. You can file that up. We can fight terror. It's cool. I'm so sorry. Don't punish me. And my officer is saying, oh, the mapping, yeah, you can throw them away. I'm saying, what? He said, yeah, you can throw them away. I'm saying, what do you mean I can throw them away? This is what we do. This is our mission, right? I said, no, that's cool. I said, no, what do you mean this is cool? This is how we prevent terror attacks from happening. This is how we know. And my officer said, come on, man, stop bitching, come on. Shh, come on, that's cool. Just throw them in and get out of my office. I said, come on, man, what is going on? What do you mean I can throw them away? And my officer is looking at me and saying, well, Eran, come on. You're not in boot camp anymore. Grow up. Since when is the Israeli army inside Hebron? I don't know, since the 90s? Say, no, since 1968. Okay, for the last 40 years. Okay, we're doing mapping every night. 3-4 times a night. Okay, for the last 40 years? I don't understand. Your house, that house that you already broken into a few days back, was already broken into 1,000 times before in the last 40 years. Now grow up. I'm saying, wait, what do you say? But this is how we combating terror, right? How do we combat terror? We're stopping terror. And he said, yeah, of course we're stopping terror. But not from the mapping. I said, so from what? And he's saying, from terrorizing. This is how you stop terror. If people are afraid all the time, they cannot think about doing terror attacks. It's brilliant, right? Now get out of the office. I'm going out of the office, and I will understand for the first time, out of many more that will come in the next few months, that we are stopping terror. We're stopping terror of the settlers. We're stopping some terror, more violent terror of ourselves, but we're basically creating terror every day. And my mind just shut off completely that moment. And I'm going off to do my shifts. And for the next few months, I will continue to do the exact same things. I will go into houses. I will arrest adults. I will arrest children under the age of 10 sometimes. I will break in protests. I will break up protesters from firing them. Tear gas canister, rubber bullets, sometimes live ammunition. I will go into houses and I will grab them and will get the houses to my unit and making other people leave. And for the next few months, I will do everything without thinking. I will just close myself up. And I will start going home in the weekends, and more I will understand that you cannot have both. You can't choose to be one guy in one place and another guy in another place. And I will get all of the answers I was always looking for. I will get home, and during that time, my girlfriend will break up with me. My mother will tell me that I became a very, very violent man. And I will literally look at the mirror, and I could not recognize my face. So after a few months of doing it, I'm going back to the base and I'm calling my friend. It's like an old friend from back home. He's like the lefty friend of the group. Nobody really likes him because he's the lefty friend of the group. The only reason we have his number is because he's really good at basketball. That's basically it. And I'm giving him a call and I'm telling him, man, you know, I never thought I will call you. But right now, you're my last out. You're the last person I can talk to. You're the last person that I think could listen. And he's saying, go. And I'm starting telling this story and many other worse stories from the last 5-6 months. And after a while, my friend is just going to tell me, whoa, Eran, okay, relax. If you're so on the edge, if you're so bad, if your situation is so extreme, would you think about coming with us the next weekend? You're coming out of the army with Anarchists Against the Wall to a protest in Berlin. And I'm saying, whoa. Anarchists Against the Wall, the crazy, I don't know, earrings, what is anarchist? No, man, there's no way, I'm not in, I'm not coming. And my friend is basically telling me, well, Eran, what do you got to lose? And I understand that I don't really have a lot to lose. I hang up the phone, and the next weekend that I'm leaving, instead of going to Jerusalem, I find myself in Tel Aviv. going on a bus with anarchists against the wall to the village of Bilin. The village of Bilin, a small village in the middle of Palestine, where the separation barrier is cutting half of the village land and half of their olive growth to the other side of the, what then was still a fence, today is a concrete wall. And every Friday since 2003, the people of the village of Bilin, the Popular Committee, is marching into the wall with drums, with singing, screaming at the soldiers at the wall, to get lost, get off of their land, non-violent protest every Friday. And this is how I find myself in the middle of a Palestinian village. And I'm scared shitless. I was never so scared. I didn't understand a word they were saying. I didn't have my gun. I didn't have my backup. I didn't have my uniform or my grenades or anything. And people start marching. And that was a really scary moment for me. Because, you know, I was taught that every one of them can stab me in every single moment. We just start marching. And there's some people drumming and some people singing. And we're marching into the fence. And then I see a few young men rising up from the side, throwing some stones in the direction of the fence. And then immediately, 360 around us, military units are just popping up from nowhere and just start shooting at our bodies. And that was so scary. They were shooting rubber bullets, and I don't know if you know, but rubber bullets are not rubber bullets. They're steel bullets with a little bit of rubber around them. And they're shooting tear gas canisters into our body, and nobody ever shot at me. I shot at protesters before, but nobody ever shot at me. And that was so scary that the only thing I can think about doing was just like, stop shooting, I'm an Israeli soldier, I'm an Israeli soldier, stop shooting. And then one of the anarchist guys looking at me like this, said, I'm an Israeli soldier too! Stop shooting! And then a bunch of Palestinians are coming and saying, we are all Israeli soldiers, you can go! I was not laughing. Because the tear gas started to kick in. I don't know if you ever got tear gas, but tear gas just choke you up completely. Just closes you up completely. And until today, I don't know if the tear gas is really working here or it's working here. But it's working. And you feel that you cannot breathe. My instinct was to try to run away from the gas, but it just made it worse. So I'm finding myself on floor in the middle of the village, trying to breathe. And I can't. And after a few moments, some people will run next to me, and one young Palestinian man that's running away from the gas would just grab me and just run with me until we reach his home. Just put me in his home until I can breathe again. And I'm leaving his home, and I'm leaving Bilin. I'm going back on the bus, back to my home, and I know this is it for me. I will never go back to do the same things again, ever. But then Sunday comes. So I'm putting on my uniform, I'm taking my gun, and I'm going back to Hebron. Because I didn't know any other reality outside of those. I didn't have any friends who didn't serve at the army. I didn't have any family member I could talk about not wanting to go back. So I'm going back to Hebron, but this time I'm promising myself it's going to be different. So I'm continue going to protest with anarchists against the wall, and after a few weeks, they will meet me up with Doctors Without Borders in Tel Aviv. You know Doctors Without Borders? So the Israeli branch of Doctors Without Borders have a very specific situation. I will sit with them in Tel Aviv one Friday, and they will explain to me that every Palestinians, you know, have to go through multiple checkpoints in the West Bank to get to other places, to get to hospitals in Israel proper, or inside the West Bank to get treatment, medicine inside the West Bank. They will have to go through checkpoints with special permits that the Israeli army is getting out, humanitarian permits. But, you know, everybody here in the room knows that the Israeli army is the most moral army in the world, right? Okay. So the Israeli army does get these permits out. But instead of giving it to the Palestinians or the sick families, it getting out to the lawyers of Doctors Without Borders, because they were the ones that are harassing them every day. And after he's given the permits to Doctors Without Borders, all they need to do is to make sure nobody from Doctors Without Borders can go to the West Bank into these families and give them the permits. And this is how the Israeli army is protecting himself all around legally. And I don't understand what do you want me to do. And they explained to me, and this is how I find myself in the next year and a half, sneaking out from my base in the middle of the night in Hebron, in South Mount Hebron, basically getting into houses in the middle of the night again, with my vest, with my uniform, knocking on the door. But this time I will be kind of a guest. I will give people permits to go through checkpoints. I will give people medicine at their homes. And in return, I will hear their stories about how it is to live under a military occupation. During this time, I'm hearing about a little group called Breaking the Silence, a group of veteran combat soldiers that collecting testimonies from other soldiers and giving it out to the Israeli public and abroad. And I will start giving them stories from inside the army. And the day of my release, I'm joined Breaking the Silence, and for the next 2.5 years, I will become their chief investigator, will take interviews, investigation of more than 250, almost 300 soldiers throughout the West Bank, and will try to publish them to the Israeli public. And I know that the occupation will fall very shortly, because they didn't heard my story yet, and the story of the people I'm collecting their testimonies. But months go by and nothing changed. And after a few months, Operation Keslet started. And Operation Keslet was so bad. We sat at Jerusalem in the end of 2008 and just heard it on the news. But everything we heard was from the IDF spokesman, because we didn't have any reporters reporting us. So we had to listen to Al Jazeera or CNN or any other networking from outside. And I understand that I have to understand what's really going on there. So I find myself going up to the border with Gaza, the southern border of Israel, and just waiting for soldiers to come out from Gaza to tell me their stories. And after 3 weeks, soldiers are starting to come out, and some of them are stopping next to me and tell me their stories. And they were very, very confused. Not all of them, but some of them. They were confused because they were getting ready for a war. For the last years and months of their training, they were getting ready for a war. And they got to Gaza and they got the war. They saw tank shells just bombing everything in sight. Air Force bombs of tons just falling out on civilians, clearing the path for them. They saw white phosphorus falling from the sky, burning everything it touches. But until it was their time to walk in by foot, there was no enemy left. Just hundreds of hundreds of hundreds of dead bodies around them. And they were very confused. For the next 3 months, I will collect all the testimonies I can from any soldiers that I can that served in Gaza during the operation. I'll go back home and I will put it in a booklet of Breaking the Silence. But before we take it out to the Israeli public, we want to make sure that we have a good platform. So we're approaching the most lefty newspaper in Israel. Do you know what's the most lefty newspaper in Israel? Haaretz. So Bamba, you didn't know, and that you know. It's really misguidance of Israel. We're approaching Haaretz, and especially Amos Sarel, the military reporter of Haaretz. And I'm talking with him, and I'm telling him the stories, and he's telling me, whoa, man, if this is true, you guys are getting a cover story. And for the next 2 weeks, he will verify the story, and then he will say, you got it. You got a cover story. So all of us in Breaking the Silence is going out to the stores and buying all the Haaretz we can, but there is no cover story, or backstory, or middle. There is no story, and we're going back to the office, and we're calling the Haaretz editorial and saying, what happened? And they're saying, oh, well, basically, we got a call last night from the IDF spokesman. And he told us you got 2 options. Or you're going with us, or you're going with Breaking the Silence. But if you're going with Breaking the Silence, we were not working with you anymore. And our editorials continue and telling us, you know, we don't really have investigative reporters inside Gaza or the West Bank, except for maybe Amira Haas. So we really rely on the IDF spokesman to give us the truth from those territories. And we hang up the phone, and I'm flipping through the booklet that the Israeli public will not see anymore, but I noticed there's holes in the stories. There's a few stories missing completely, and there's a few stories with holes in the middle of them. So I'm going to my boss at the time, to Yehuda, and I'm telling him, hey man, what's going on? And Yehuda is looking at me and saying, oh, that's cool, that's cool. It's only what the IDF censorship took down. I'm saying, what? I say, the IDF censorship, what? You know that every news in Israel, every channel in Israel, every newspaper, every radio station, every blogger on the internet have to go through the Israeli the army censorship, right? I'm saying, what? That's amazing. We don't have free press, but wait, we're breaking the silence, right? That we're breaking this silence. And Yehuda is telling me, oh yeah, we're breaking this silence that the idea of censorship allows us to break. And I understand that my days in the organization is numbered. And after a few months, I will leave Breaking the Silence, and I will continue to do the same line of work, only by my own. I will go out to the territories, the occupied territories, and I will talk with very high officers in the Israeli army, with very high people in the military security industry in Israel, civilians as well. I will take all their stories, but instead of going back to Breaking the Silence, I will go to the New York Times, to the Guardian, to the Washington Post. I will start publishing it outside. And after a year, I get into a very weird story. In 2010, I'm getting into a story of how the Israeli government and Israeli army sell the Singapore police a new tear gas canister. And according to the website of the Minister of Security in Israel, this tear gas canister is so good. It's the best tear gas canister ever tried by the IDF and proven to be the most deadliest ever tried by the IDF. And I'm taking steps back. And I'm starting my research. And I understand that the Israeli army is testing its weapons every day. In Bilin, in Ne'alin, in Kfar Kadum, in Abi Salah, in Bethlehem, in Hebron, in East Jerusalem. Every day the Israeli army is trading weapons after testing it on Palestinians. I start digging in more and more because I can't believe what I see. And the more I go in, the more I find out. Do you remember those guys that throw stones in the beginning of the protests? They were not Palestinians, not the first one anyway. They were an undercover unit of the Israeli army, looking like me, Arab Jews, that disguised themselves as Palestinians, going inside the villages and starting riots. So the Israeli army will have a good excuse to start firing up the place. And they're testing weapons every day. And how long does it go? And I'm digging more and more in. And then I understand we're going 30, 40 years back. It didn't start now. The Israeli army, the Israeli government was trading officially or non-officially with all the worst regimes and dictatorships in the world in the last 40 to 50 years. Trading weapons, trading knowledge, training the soldiers themselves, the regimes themselves. Sometimes taking an active part in killing people in those countries. And the more I go in, the more I understand. This is not an occupation. This is a laboratory. And inside this laboratory, sometimes as a soldier, I would inject poison. And sometimes as a protesters with Palestinians in their villages, I would be a lab rat, running around in circles. And I understand that I'm not standing in the right place. I'm living in Jerusalem and I'm moving to New York. In the last 3 years, all I'm doing is research about how the Israeli army and the American army is joining hands and joining money and training half of the world. I'm going to do a cut right now because usually I'm ending lectures a bit differently. But I want to stop and tell you a story. 2 months ago or 2.5 months ago, we were in Maryland Highway on our way to Washington, D.C. to do this kind of lectures. And we were on the Maryland Highway, in the middle of the Maryland Highway, and we got to a car accident. And we were stuck in the middle of like a 7-lane highway. And we were coming from Jerusalem, okay? So we were like country boys, girls and boys. And we're stuck on the Maryland Highway, and we need to call the police. We don't love it, but we do. And the Maryland police is coming, and they're very efficient. They're taking us out of the highway, and there's a tall guy that comes and takes mine, another friend with our car into the lot, and I'm getting a ride along with the Maryland officer from the Maryland police, and we're driving for 10 minutes, and after 10 minutes, the guy's saying, "So, where are you from?" And I'm saying, "I'm from Israel. I'm from Israel." And he said, "Oh man, you guys are badasses. You know how to silence your opposition. You know how to fuck up with who define you. You know how to silence them. I wish we could be more like you. Oh man, you're great." And I'm saying, whoa, man. I'm not sure you understand really what the Israeli army is doing, okay? He said, "Oh, no. I just came back from there." And I said, "What, like tourist thing?" He said, "Oh no, with the Maryland police. We just came back from training with your army." And I'm saying, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Oh, yeah, man, we were, most of our police in the US is training with your army and your police. You know that, right?" And I'm saying, "No, wait. And I'm starting to ask more and more questions. And after about 15 minutes, I will get off at the lot. And before I'm leaving the car, I'm saying, "Is there a chance you know Shlomo Efrati, my dad?" And the guy is taking his cell phone outside, his smartphone outside, and flipping for pictures. And he got a picture hugged with my dad that was in charge of his training in Jerusalem with the police. And I'm saying, what the hell? I'm getting out of the car and I'm calling my dad at Jerusalem. It's like, 12 o'clock in the Maryland Highway. And I'm calling my dad and saying, what is going on? And my dad is telling me, "Well, Erani, come on, don't be naive. You know NYPD got an office in Tel Aviv, right? You know we got an office in New York, right? Come on, this is how we protect you guys." And I understand. For years I'm doing different versions of lectures to different people in Israel and in the United States. And every time I'm finishing with Palestinian cause is a humanitarian crisis that all of you in this country have a very big part of creating. It's a humanitarian crisis and all of us always want to be on the right side of history at the right time, and this is the right time. But this time I'm not going to end like this. So if you don't care about Palestinians in this room, I'm cool with that. And if you don't care about us Israelis asking you guys to step in and help us get down with the apartheid regime in Israel, that's also fine. But you should know that you are next in line. It's not a private thing that happened. Each one in his own community. They, the government, the police, they are organizing globally to oppress us. And we need to start organizing globally to resist them. Because we are here as next in one. This is why I joined the call, the BDS call from 2005 of the Civil Society of Palestinians, of boycott, divestment and sanction, in a non-violent way, taking it from the source, breaking it up before the next one who will die from a rubber bullet or a tear gas canister will die here in Denver, or down in New Mexico, or in Zuccotti Park, or in Oakland. This is the next step. They are all organizing globally to oppress us. We need to start organizing globally to resist them. I hope you join us for the call for boycott, divestment and sanction on the apartheid state of Israel. And thank you very much for your time.